My name is Penelope Mitchell. I am 68 years old, and I live in a quiet coastal town in Oregon where the sea air smells of salt and pine. For 5 years, I have been treated like the maid in my own house, though I never signed up for such a role. My son Franklin and his wife Catherine found it convenient to let me handle everything. They lived as if the house was their stage while I stayed in the wings, making sure the lights were on and the food was hot. It started small. Franklin would ask me to help with dinner. Catherine would hand me a list of errands. I thought I was being useful, that keeping peace would keep my family close. But the requests grew into orders. Bring more wine. Clean up the mess. Serve the dessert. Their voices carried authority while mine was muted. After parties, I was always the one clearing dishes long past midnight, while Catherine's friends lounged on the couch laughing. They never saw the grease on my hands or the ache in my knees. My reward was silence, no word of thanks. I told myself I was keeping traditions alive, but really I was losing myself inside those walls. I remember nights, standing at the sink with soapy water, while the sound of laughter floated from the living room. I would pause and listen, wondering when my presence had stopped being part of the joy. My role was to feed it, clean it, and vanish. I began to feel like a ghost who only existed when something needed to be done. The mornings were not better. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen, but it was never brewed for me. Catherine would sweep in with her heels, tapping sharp notes against the tile, calling my name as if she were summoning staff. I would hand her a steaming cup and watch her walk away, the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air, leaving me with the bitter taste of my own silence. Winter came early that year. The light outside turned silver and cold, painting every window with a reminder of the season. My body felt heavier with every task. I wondered if anyone even noticed how much of myself I was giving away. The holidays approached, and with them came Catherine's demands for perfection. One afternoon, she walked into the kitchen in a bright red dress, her smile wide but sharp. The heels clicked like little hammers against my nerves. She sat down and announced she had marvelous news. Her family, all 30 of them, were coming to spend Christmas here. She listed them off like groceries, her voice full of excitement. She did not ask. She simply assumed. I stood frozen, listening as she described the turkeys, the pies, the decorations. She wanted the house perfect for photographs, perfect for appearances. Her words stung, each one reminding me of the years I had given. She paused, expecting me to nod, to say yes, to step into the role of unpaid servant one more time. Inside, something cracked. Years of exhaustion pressed against my chest. I looked at her face, still glowing with certainty, and I felt a calm rise within me. My voice came steady, almost surprising myself. Perfect, I said. Perfect because I will not be here. The air stopped moving. Catherine blinked as if she had misheard. The sound of her heels ceased. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to quiet. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time in 5 years, she had no script prepared for my refusal. The December light outside shone colder, sharper, as if it had been waiting for this moment. I let the silence stretch, a silence that belonged to me. The tension filled the room, but I felt free. In that instant, I had taken back something precious. It was not about the turkeys or the pies or even the Christmas gathering. It was about my voice, about choosing not to be invisible. I watched her face pale, the confidence slipping away. The smell of coffee lingered between us, bitter and strong, and I breathed it in as if it were proof that I was still alive, still capable of choosing. That day, in that small kitchen, with icy light pouring through the windows, I stepped out of the weight of silence and into the beginning of my own liberation. I still remember the day I opened a drawer in Franklin's office and found a folder tucked between stacks of old bills. At first, I thought it was routine paperwork. Then I saw Catherine's name again and again, tied to credit cards I had never heard of and loans that made no sense. My hands shook as I read line after line. She had been spending money they did not have, and worse, she had been using my name and my reputation to make herself look secure. The more I read, the colder I felt. I saw receipts from luxury stores and online orders that stretched into the thousands. I saw emails where Catherine boasted to friends about how easy it was to impress her relatives because she had me in the background, cleaning, cooking, and smiling. It was not just the debt that broke me. It was the realization that she had woven my life into her web of lies. For years, I thought keeping quiet preserved my family. Instead, it had made me the mask behind which Catherine built her image. I could not sleep that night. I lay awake listening to the house creak, the ocean wind pressing against the windows, and I felt the sting of betrayal settle deep in my chest. By dawn, I knew I had to act. I called a lawyer whose number I had saved years earlier after my husband died. We sat together in his office papers spread across a polished desk, and I asked him how to protect what was mine. His voice was calm as he explained the steps. Move your savings into a secure account. Reinforce the deed on the house. Close every door Catherine could try to force open. I walked out of that office steadier than I had felt in years. I visited the bank and signed the documents. I held the new account papers in my hand like a shield. For the first time in a long time, I felt control returning. I came home that evening and hung my coat by the door. My eyes went to a single brass key that hung on a small hook near the entryway. It had been there for decades, almost invisible, but in that moment it felt like a symbol. From now on, I would decide who had access to my home, my life, and my trust. The silence of the house no longer pressed on me. It vibrated with a different kind of energy, one of careful planning. I still moved quietly, but every step was deliberate. I was no longer the invisible maid. I was becoming a woman with a plan, a strategist, and her own story. Each detail I uncovered and each protection I put in place was a seed of awakening, and I knew those seeds were going to grow into something no one in this family expected. Catherine had a way of speaking that made every word feel final. One evening, she leaned against the counter, eyes fixed on Franklin, and told him the house would be theirs one day. She said it casually, as if it were already written, and added that until then, I could keep doing what I did best, cooking and serving like I always had. Franklin nodded weakly, and I felt the sting of being dismissed not just by my daughter-in-law, but by my own son. I did not argue. I simply walked back to my room and opened my laptop. My hands were steady as I searched for flights to Santa Fe, choosing one at random for the day before Christmas Eve. I never intended to board that plane, but I wanted the lie in place. If Catherine or Franklin pressed me, I would have proof ready. The act of booking it felt like drawing a line in the sand. When the confirmation email arrived, I turned my attention to another task. I drafted letters to 3 of Catherine's most influential relatives, including her wealthy Uncle Callum. My words were polite, respectful, but edged with concern. I explained that I was worried about the financial situation and attached copies of the bank statements I had found. Each attachment was a stone dropped into calm water ripples, spreading far beyond this house. The house itself seemed to respond to my decision. The old clock in the hallway ticked louder than usual, marking each second like a drumbeat of resolve. I opened my closet and began to pack. Every fold of clothing into the suitcase sounded like a promise kept to myself. The wheels scraped against the stair treads as I pulled the suitcase down, each thud echoing through the empty rooms. In the kitchen, I sat for a moment before writing a short note on plain paper. I kept it simple. The house is in your hands. Merry Christmas. I placed it on the table beside the spare keys, my handwriting steady and firm. It was not just a message for them, but a declaration that I was no longer part of their charade. I walked through the house once more, letting my hand brush the doorframe as I reached the entry. The air smelled of pine and cold ocean wind. My heart beat slow and steady. When I pulled the door closed behind me, The click of the lock felt final. A trap had been set, and I knew it would not be long before it sprang. The morning chaos in that house must have been a sight. Catherine opened the pantry only to find bare shelves staring back at her. The refrigerator hummed with nothing inside but a jar of mustard and half a lemon. She stormed from room to room, pulling open drawers, searching for china that no longer gleamed in the cabinets and decorations that were locked away. Franklin followed behind her, running his hands through his hair as the clock in the hallway kept ticking toward the arrival of 30 guests. Voices rose, footsteps pounded, and the air grew thick with panic. Catherine clutched her phone dialing caterers, only to hear holiday messages telling her everything was closed or booked solid. Franklin suggested fast food in a voice that cracked under pressure. Soon, delivery boys in red uniforms carried stacks of greasy pizza boxes through the front door, each one a reminder that the perfect holiday she promised had collapsed into paper plates and cardboard. While the house descended into absurdity, I sat in a quiet hotel overlooking the bay. The room was warm, the curtains pulled back to show the calm stretch of water, and a tray of lobster and golden butter rested in front of me. The only sound was the clink of silver on porcelain as I cut into my meal. My phone buzzed and blinked, but I had set it to silent. I took another bite, savoring flavors I never would have made for myself at home, because Catherine always insisted on austerity while she spent money elsewhere. Later, when curiosity won, I checked my voicemail. Franklin's voice tumbled out fast, almost frantic. "Mom, please, Catherine is crying in the bathroom. She does not know what to do. We cannot handle this. Please come back." His desperation carried through the speaker, but it only made me smile. For 5 long years, I had solved every problem, big and small. Now they were staring at the wreckage of their own choices, and I was finally free to watch from a distance. I leaned back, letting the ocean air drift in through the balcony door. The laughter and clamor that once made me feel like a ghost in my own home was replaced with silence and the taste of freedom. It felt like justice, sharp and satisfying. In their panic, they were learning that hospitality did not fall from the sky, and that respect could no longer be taken for granted. The first car pulled up at 10 o'clock, sharp tires crunching against the driveway gravel. Callum stepped out in a tailored coat, his presence commanding even before he spoke. Behind him came cousins, siblings, and children, all expecting a holiday feast. Instead, they walked into a house that smelled of cold pizza and panic. Paper plates lay scattered on the counter, and Catherine's eyes were red as she tried to smile through the chaos. Callum's voice cut through the noise. "Where is the dinner you promised Catherine? Where is the hostess you described in such glowing detail?" Franklin stood by the doorway, his shoulders slumped, looking more like a lost boy than a grown man. Catherine stammered about last-minute problems, her words tumbling into excuses that sounded hollow against the ticking clock. One of the cousins asked where Penelope was the grandmother who supposedly organized every tradition. Silence fell. Catherine tried to speak, but Callum held up a hand and demanded the truth. Franklin pulled out his phone, called me on speaker, and begged me to explain. I listened to their voices trembling in the background before answering. Yes, the statements are real. Yes, Catherine has been spending money you did not know about. And yes, for years I was the one hosting cooking and cleaning while she took the credit. Gasps filled the room. Callum's face hardened, his voice like steel. There will be no support, he declared. We were ready to invest in Franklin's business, but not under false pretenses. Catherine must face the reality she created. The weight of his words pressed on every corner of the room. Catherine's cheeks flushed deep red and tears slid down her face, but no one reached to comfort her. Franklin's voice cracked as he asked if it was true if Catherine had borrowed money, claiming she would inherit the house and savings. When she lowered her head, his knees almost gave out. He realized he had been blind, that his wife had gambled with lies built on his mother's name. The relatives murmured, their voices rising like a courtroom jury weighing guilt. Each whispered question chipped away at the fragile mask Catherine had worn for years. Callum ended the debate with finality. We will not be deceived again. Catherine, you will answer to every person you misled. The room fell into heavy silence, broken only by the sound of Catherine's sobs. The truth had unraveled in front of everyone, and there was no curtain left to hide behind. I walked back into the house on Christmas Eve with Robert, my lawyer, beside me. The living room was heavy with silence, broken only by the fire crackling in the hearth. Catherine sat small on the couch, her eyes swollen from crying, while Franklin stood near the window staring out at nothing. Robert placed his briefcase on the table and opened it with calm precision, the sound sharp in the stillness. I spoke first, steady and clear. The house is now under legal protection. It has been placed in a family trust. It cannot be sold or mortgaged without my consent. Catherine, you no longer have free access here. Any visit must be approved. You will repay the debts you created, and you will apologize to every relative you misled. Robert handed over the documents, his presence giving my words the weight they needed. Franklin's shoulders slumped, his voice cracking, as he admitted he had chosen convenience over respect. He said it was easier to let Catherine run things, easier to let me carry the burden, easier to ignore the truth. Tears filled his eyes as he confessed that in his silence he had abandoned me. The words cut, but they also released something in me. For the first time, he was acknowledging what I had lived through. Then came a twist I had not expected. Callum revealed that Catherine grew up in deep poverty. She had spent her childhood hiding threadbare clothes and fearing every judgmental glance. Her obsession with appearances came from that well of shame. I saw Catherine bow her head as the truth spread across the room. It did not excuse her actions, but it explained the desperation behind them. My heart softened just enough to give her a path forward. Mercy, I told her, comes with conditions. You will repair what you broke. You will face those you deceived, and you will learn to live without leaning on lies. My voice was firm, but compassion threaded through it. She looked at me with a mix of shame and relief, as if even boundaries felt like a lifeline. When the papers were signed and the house quiet again, I walked to the hallway. I lifted a single brass key and placed it on the hook by the door. I looked at them both and said, "Access to my life is earned by respect, not by blood alone." The clock struck midnight, and for the first time in years I felt peace.